You know the standard drill for personal change? You decide you want to build a new habit, or, I don't know, be more patient, or stop getting instantly defensive during a disagreement.
Right. We've all been there.
Yeah, and you gather your resolve, grit your teeth, and just try to force that new behavior into existence. You stretch yourself out like this um, thick rubber band, using all your conscious strength to hold that new, unnatural shape.
Which works for about a day.
Exactly. Because eventually you get tired. You have a stressful day, your focus slips, and the second you let up snap, you violently snap right back to exactly where you started.
Yeah, the classic rebound.
And the conclusion we almost always draw, is that we just didn't have enough willpower.
Right, because we treat personal transformation like a blunt force physics problem. The assumption is always that if the change didn't stick, well, we simply didn't apply enough force to overcome our bad habits.
Today, though, we are completely flipping that script. The mission for this deep dive is to explore a radically different, low-effort mechanics of personal transformation.
It's really a fascinating shift in perspective.
It really is. We are pulling from a deeply fascinating paper today. It's titled The Maintenance of the Self-Phenomenon, Bodily Observation, and Change Measured by Reduced Friction.
Yeah, the title is pretty academic, I know.
A bit, yeah.
But the mechanics inside, I mean, they fundamentally deconstruct how we approach self-improvement and
Yeah.
basically argues that willpower is actually the completely wrong tool for the job.
Okay, let's unpack this because the core premise really shifts the blame away from your lack of effort.
Hmm.
The paper argues that you do not need more willpower because your personality, your default reactions, your habits, it's not maintained through effort.
Right, not at all.
You are living inside a structure that sustains itself automatically. Like, as long as you are experiencing things subjectively, your continuous sense of who you are is just running on autopilot.
And, what's fascinating here is that the sheer power of that automatic maintenance is exactly what makes change so frustrating.
Oh, totally.
The source material establishes that this automatic self-sustaining force is vastly stronger than any conscious effort you could possibly muster.
Wow.
So when we try to force change, we are essentially pitting a tiny, easily exhausted reserve of conscious control against this massive, deeply entrenched automatic system.
Right. If we think about that entrenched system as like a speeding freight train, relying on willpower is basically like standing on the tracks and pushing against the front of the engine to slow it down.
A terrible idea.
Yeah. You might slow it a fraction of an inch, but you are going to be completely crushed in the process. Conscious effort it isn't designed to be the engine of change.
Exactly. It's a total misuse of human energy. The paper explicitly states that conscious effort shouldn't be used to force transformation. Instead of trying to stop the train by pushing against its momentum, conscious effort should be utilized as a support function.
Meaning, your conscious effort should be standing off to the side, quietly switching the tracks. You let the train's massive momentum continue, but you subtly alter the environment so the train naturally, glides in a new direction. You use your effort to change the conditions, not to fight the momentum directly.
Right, because true structural change happens by shifting the conditions under which your sense of self is maintained.
Yeah.
You're basically allowing the physics of your own automatic system to do the heavy lifting for you.
Instead of constantly fighting against it.
Exactly.
But to switch those tracks, though, you first have to know where the train is currently running, right? Like,
Right.
you have to observe your present state.
You do.
But the source outlines this massive trap here. It warns that simply looking at your current state, if you do it incorrectly, can accidentally reinforce the exact bad habits you are trying to escape.
And this is perhaps the most counterintuitive concept in the whole text.
It blew my mind a little bit.
Right. Because when people decide to change, they usually start by fixating on an ideal image of who they want to be. But the paper argues that the first requirement isn't visualizing an ideal, but observing the present state. Just seeing how your current configuration
Right.
is being maintained right now.
And the trap lies in exactly how we observe. The paper specifically calls out the cognitive mind.
Mm-hmm.
The moment you use your mind to observe your current state, it immediately starts evaluating. You notice you're feeling anxious, and your mind is like, this is bad, I shouldn't be anxious, I need to fix this.
Yep, instantly.
And the moment that evaluation happens, your existing self-maintenance system feels attacked and gets super defensive.
Because the cognitive mind is fundamentally a narrative machine. It twists simple observation into improvement pressure.
Improvement pressure.
Yeah, it starts generating stories and interpretations and justifications. And the system you are attempting to change detects that pressure as a threat, so it shores up its defenses to maintain its current structure.
And the paper describes the result of this as a false transformation, which is just a genuinely unsettling concept.
Oh, very much so.
Like, a false transformation means your behavior appears to change on the surface, but the underlying structure hasn't shifted at all. It's just the old structure putting on a disguise.
Right. A perfect example would be someone trying to overcome their anger issues by cognitively forcing themselves to be calm.
Oh, sure.
They might stop yelling, but they're achieving that calmness by rigidly suppressing their natural reactions. The internal tension is still there, maybe even worse than before.
So they're just bottling it up.
Exactly. They haven't become a more peaceful person. They've just developed a highly stressful mechanism for hiding their anger.
They built a dam over the river instead of redirecting the flow. The pressure is still building up behind the wall. The underlying architecture of the personality is still completely rigid and, high friction. Because they used mental force and judgment, the system just adapted to protect itself.
Which is exhausting.
Mm.
And to avoid that trap, the solution the paper offers is to completely abandon cognitive observation
Right.
and rely entirely on bodily observation.
Wait, let me push back on this, though. If I want to change something about myself, isn't it inherently because I've evaluated that thing as bad or unhelpful?
Well, sure.
How is it even possible to observe myself without judging it? Like, the desire to change requires some level of evaluation.
It seems like a paradox, but the distinction the text makes is between the mind's tendency to judge and the body's capacity to simply report.
Okay, go on.
So the mind creates psychological tension by saying, I am terrible at public speaking, my anxiety is a flaw I must eradicate. That judgment tightens your internal structure.
Right.
The body, however, operates entirely differently. The body just reports sensory data. It just says there is tightness in my shoulders, my breathing is shallow, my jaw is clenched.
So it provides a direct feed without editorializing. Like, the body doesn't tell a story about why the tight shoulders make you a complete failure.
Exactly. The body is far less skilled at constructing narratives than the mind is. It doesn't deal in self-justification or ideology. It just deals in sensation.
Wow.
And that makes the body the perfect, unbiased entry point for observing your current configuration without triggering the system's alarm bells.
That makes so much sense. And the paper lists these specific non-narrative signs to look for. Things like constriction in the breath, tightness in the chest or abdomen, tension in the neck, shifts in your center of gravity, a narrowing of your visual field, or just internal restlessness.
The narrowing of the visual field is a particularly visceral one.
Really?
Yeah, under stress, people literally develop tunnel vision. They stop perceiving the periphery of their environment. So noticing that physiological shift, simply acknowledging that your visual field has contracted, well, it carries zero self-judgment. You are merely recognizing the current structural state.
Let's ground this in a real scenario for a second. Let's say you're sitting in a meeting, a colleague says something highly critical of your work. Your automatic habit is to snap back defensively.
A classic trigger.
Right. Now, according to this framework, if you use your mind and say, don't be defensive, stay professional, you create that false transformation. You'll just swallow the anger and sit there completely tense.
Yeah, you've added improvement pressure, which locks the defensive structure in place right under the surface.
But if you use bodily observation in that exact same meeting, you bypass the narrative entirely. You feel the critique, and instead of judging your reaction, you simply scan the physical data. You notice, oh, my stomach is tied in a knot, and my breathing has moved up into my collarbones. But wait, how does merely observing those physical sensations actually trigger a change in the habit? Like, how do we use that to actually switch the track?
Well, the text describes the actual mechanism of change not as aggressive control, but as tuning.
Tuning.
Yeah, similar to tuning a misaligned musical instrument.
Yeah.
When you aggressively try to transform a habit, you encounter massive resistance. But when unnecessary tension or structural distortion is simply brought into awareness through bodily sensing, some of it naturally begins to relax on its own.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the paper offers this brilliant framework to explain why this works. It introduces the concept that different forms of consciousness have different weights.
The concept of weight is absolutely crucial here. Controlling consciousness, which is the mental effort of trying to force a change, is heavy.
Yeah.
When you try to control your state, you are adding weight, pressure, and friction to your internal system.
It feels heavy. It physically feels exhausting to just constantly monitor and suppress your own reactions.
Conversely, observing consciousness, sensing consciousness, and touching consciousness are light.
Okay.
Bodily observation is effective precisely because it relies on this much lighter form of awareness. You aren't forcing the tight chest to open up. You're simply resting a light sensory awareness on the tightness.
It really reframes the entire concept of effort. Because you might initially assume that a light awareness just isn't powerful enough to change a deeply ingrained personality trait.
Right, we're taught to push hard.
Exactly. But the paper explains that transformation isn't about applying overwhelming force. It's about gradually altering conditions until you cross a threshold.
And the sequence laid out in the text is quite specific. First, you observe the current pattern, using that light, non-judgmental bodily awareness.
Step.
Second, you gradually alter the conditions. This could be a minute physical adjustment, like shifting your posture slightly, intentionally dropping your shoulders, or just simply allowing a full exhale.
Simple physical adjustments.
Right. Third, you repeat this subtle tuning over time. And fourth, you eventually cross a structural threshold.
That threshold is really where the magic happens. Think of it like trying to move a massive, heavy vending machine.
Oh, I like this analogy.
Yeah, at first you are fighting all of its weight. The inertia of the machine dictates that it stays flat on the floor. That represents your old habit violently resisting change.
Defending itself.
Exactly. You push and tune adjusting the physical conditions, and it requires deliberate effort. But if you keep tuning, you eventually push the machine just a fraction of an inch past its tipping point. You cross the threshold.
And at that exact moment, gravity takes over.
Yeah.
The very same weight and inertia that were fighting against you just a moment ago are now pulling the machine down in the new direction.
Boom.
The automatic inertia completely flips to support the new state.
Which completely demystifies how profound personal change actually stabilizes. You don't have to keep pushing the vending machine forever.
No, thankfully.
In the beginning, the inertia of your self-maintaining structure resists. You use that light bodily tuning to gradually alter the internal conditions. But once enough of those physical and sensory conditions shift, you cross the tipping point.
You're over the hump.
Yeah, the exact same automatic self-sustaining force that used to lock you into being defensive now begins to maintain your new, calmer configuration automatically.
The new track has been laid, and the train is smoothly running on it without requiring your conscious effort to propel it forward. The system is now self-sustaining in a healthier direction.
Which brings us to a really vital checkpoint in this process. If we have crossed that threshold and gravity has taken over, how do we actually measure our success?
Good question.
Because how do we know we are genuinely changing and not just experiencing another false transformation? The paper is extremely explicit in warning against measuring progress by comparing ourselves to an ideal.
Yeah, ideals are treacherous metrics. The source argues that ideals are heavily contaminated by fantasy, ideology, and self-image.
They're made up.
Exactly. You might construct this idealized fantasy of a perfectly zen version of yourself who never feels a moment of frustration. And if you judge your daily progress against that impossible fantasy, you will constantly feel like a failure.
Which instantly triggers the heavy, controlling consciousness all over again.
Yes. The pursuit of the ideal actually prevents the change. So the paper provides a completely different, unfakeable metric, which is reduced friction.
Reduced friction.
Yes. The true measure of meaningful change is simply whether internal friction and tension are decreasing.
Because reduced friction is an entirely objective, mechanical way to evaluate human psychology. Like, ideals can be faked. You can easily feign calmness while secretly grinding your teeth.
We all know people who do that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But structural friction is a physical reality that literally cannot be counterfeited.
The paper provides several diagnostic questions to help you measure this, actually. Is your internal state less tangled? Does it require less hardening to get through your day?
And my absolute favorite from the text is the maintenance cost of your personality getting lower.
The maintenance cost of a personality is such a profound concept. If you just consider the psychological energy required to maintain certain traits.
Just think about the maintenance cost of someone who constantly needs to prove they are the smartest person in the room.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The sheer amount of energy required to constantly scan conversations for threats, to formulate counterarguments, the endless internal self-justification. I mean, the daily maintenance cost of that specific ego structure is astronomically high.
It sounds exhausting.
It's an exhausting way to exist.
And we all possess areas where our structural maintenance costs are just way too high. The text prompts us to ask, can you exist without constant self-justification? Can your internal state remain stable without needing to be actively defended against your environment?
So what does this all mean? For you, listening, navigating your daily life, this is an incredibly practical metric. It means completely discarding the exhausting vision of becoming a flawless person.
What a relief.
Truly. Instead, you simply check in with yourself and ask, does being me feel a little less exhausting today? Is there slightly less friction in how I move through the world?
There is an important nuance here, though, regarding the nature of this ease. The paper clarifies that reduced friction does not mean chasing superficial pleasure or just doing whatever feels good in the moment.
Oh, right. Important
The
distinction.
goal is structural ease.
Because numbing out in front of the television for 5 hours feels easy in the moment, but it doesn't lower the structural friction of your life. It usually increases it the next day.
Exactly. The ultimate aim is a low-maintenance self. And the source describes a very specific maturation shift that occurs as this process stabilizes.
What does that look like?
In the early stages of change, your progress looks like trying to relax. You notice tension through bodily observation, and you deliberately try to calm your system down. You're carefully managing your conditions.
So it still requires some level of active maintenance to preserve your balance.
Right. You are still operating the machinery, even if you're using a lighter touch. But as the process matures, the mode of maintenance fundamentally changes. You shift from trying to relax to not becoming tense so easily in the first place.
And that shift is the manifestation of the threshold we discussed earlier.
Spot on. Relaxation no longer needs to be produced by conscious intention. The internal state has just become naturally light. It remains stable with significantly less active management.
So friction decreases without deliberate control.
Because the underlying structure has genuinely reorganized itself.
The automatic maintaining force, the gravity pulling the vending machine, is now doing the work for you. You aren't holding the thick rubber band stretched out anymore.
No, you're not.
Through light observation and subtle tuning, you have actually changed the resting shape of the rubber band itself. When you let go, it just stays in its new form effortlessly.
It really is a complete paradigm shift from how modern culture typically approaches self-improvement. It basically replaces the endless grind of willpower with a deep trust in the physics of your own nervous system and physical structure.
Okay, let's pull the core threads of this deep dive together. If you are exhausted by the cycle of forcing a new habit only to bounce right back to square one, the message from this research is incredibly clear.
Stop fighting your automatic self with sheer willpower.
Yes, it is a losing battle against a vastly stronger force.
You really must let go of the operator self, that part of your mind that believes it has to violently micromanage every single aspect of your personal growth.
Drop the mental judgment. The cognitive mind is a trap that triggers your internal defenses and creates those exhausting false transformations. Instead, tune into the honest, non-narrative signals of your body. Notice the tightness in your chest, the shallow breath, the narrowing vision. Use that light sensory observation to quietly tune and adjust your physical conditions.
Subtle shifts.
Exactly. Repeatedly alter those conditions until you push the structure just far enough to tip past the threshold. And from that point on, measure your success purely by how much your daily internal friction drops.
By relying on bodily observation and the metric of reduced friction, you align your efforts with the natural mechanics of your own system, rather than fighting a perpetual war against them.
Think about how liberating this approach actually is. We aren't handing you a massive new to-do list today. We aren't telling you to hustle harder or dig deeper.
No, not at all.
We are actually giving you permission to stop forcing things, to put down the heavy, controlling consciousness and let your natural automatic mechanics do the heavy lifting.
It is a profoundly more efficient and honestly humane way to evolve.
It changes everything. Now, as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final thought to explore on your own. We spent a lot of time discussing how your current self is maintained automatically by the conditions around you.
Right.
So, take a look at your life today. Since your current high-friction habits are being perfectly sustained by external and internal conditions, what is one hidden physical condition in your environment right now that is quietly doing the heavy lifting to keep your bad habits intact? What is the physical anchor holding your rubber band in place? Find that condition, observe it lightly without judgment, and see what happens to your internal friction when you simply let it go.